The entire company lobby fell silent when Serena Vaughn stepped out of the black Rolls-Royce. Diamond earrings caught the white marble lights above her head. Security guards lowered their eyes respectfully as she walked forward slowly. Ethan Caldwell stopped breathing the moment their eyes finally met again. His divorce papers still sat signed inside his office upstairs. Serena looked at him calmly, almost coldly, then handed a silver folder to the board chairman beside her. "Cancel the acquisition meeting immediately," she said without raising her voice. The chairman nodded instantly. Ethan's stomach tightened. That was the exact moment he realized his wife was never ordinary. 12 hours earlier, rain hammered against the mansion windows overlooking downtown Chicago. Crystal chandeliers glowed above crowded executives wearing tailored black tuxedos and designer gowns. Ethan stood proudly beside Serena during his company celebration dinner. She wore a simple dark dress without expensive jewelry or bright makeup. Some executives whispered quietly while glancing toward her worn handbag nearby. Ethan noticed every look, and embarrassment poisoned his expression slowly. "At least pretend you belong here tonight," he muttered beside her coldly. Serena stayed quiet. She always stayed quiet during moments like these. The orchestra played softly while waiters carried champagne through crowded tables. Ethan's regional promotion had become the company's biggest corporate announcement this year. Everyone wanted his attention tonight. Everyone except the woman standing faithfully beside him for 7 years already. Serena quietly fixed problems nobody else even noticed around the house daily. She handled unpaid bills before deadlines arrived every single month carefully. She stopped his younger brother from gambling company savings away secretly. She even paid Ethan's mother's medical debt without asking for recognition afterward. Nobody knew because Serena never explained herself to anyone publicly. Ethan only saw simple dresses, homemade dinners, and silence after exhausting workdays. Then the company's CFO suddenly approached their table looking visibly nervous. "Sir, the investors still haven't approved tomorrow's merger documents," he whispered urgently. Ethan cursed quietly under his breath while executives nearby pretended not listening. Serena finally lifted her eyes calmly toward the frightened CFO standing there. "Check page 14 again," she said softly. "Your overseas tax percentages were calculated incorrectly yesterday afternoon." The CFO blinked twice, confused by her sudden response. 10 minutes later, he rushed back looking completely pale under ballroom lights. "She was right," he whispered breathlessly. "She just saved the entire merger. Tonight." Ethan stared at Serena differently for one brief second. Then pride returned stronger than gratitude ever could. He grabbed the divorce papers hidden beneath his leather portfolio slowly. Serena noticed immediately when he slid them across the dinner table silently. The rain outside grew heavier while thunder shook the ballroom windows above them. Ethan leaned closer, his voice sharp enough for nearby executives hearing everything clearly. "I'm tired of carrying someone who contributes absolutely nothing anymore." Serena looked down quietly at the signature line waiting beneath bright chandelier lights. Then she slowly removed her wedding ring and placed it beside the papers. The ballroom stayed silent after Serena placed down her wedding ring calmly. Ethan expected tears, shouting, maybe one desperate apology before leaving forever. Instead, Serena folded the divorce papers carefully beside untouched champagne glasses. She stood slowly while thunder rolled outside across the Chicago skyline heavily. "Thank you for finally showing me the truth," she said quietly. Several executives lowered their eyes immediately after hearing those cold words. Ethan laughed softly, pretending her calm reaction meant absolutely nothing tonight. Serena picked up her old suitcase beside the ballroom entrance without hesitation. Rain poured harder when security opened the glass doors for her silently. Nobody noticed the senior board member watching Serena leave with concern. Nobody except Ethan's assistant standing near the marble staircase nervously shaking. 20 minutes later, Ethan entered his office feeling strangely irritated inside suddenly. Serena's side of the closet was already completely empty when he arrived home. Every drawer looked untouched, organized, almost prepared weeks before tonight happened. The kitchen lights remained off for the first time in years. Ethan opened the refrigerator slowly and frowned immediately afterward. His medication schedule was missing from the refrigerator door completely tonight. So were his mother's hospital payment reminders and weekly appointments. Ethan cursed quietly before calling his younger brother Daniel repeatedly, without answers. 30 minutes later, his phone finally rang beside the dark kitchen counter. "The casino froze my account tonight," Daniel whispered nervously over speakerphone. Ethan rubbed his forehead impatiently while loosening his expensive silk tie slowly. "Then ask Serena for help again," he snapped without thinking clearly. Silence followed immediately afterward. Daniel exhaled sharply before answering in disbelief. "You really do not know anything about your own wife." The call disconnected before Ethan could respond angrily back tonight. The next morning arrived colder than expected across downtown Chicago streets below. Ethan walked confidently toward the company tower despite sleeping barely 3 hours. Employees usually greeted him loudly after major business victories inside headquarters daily. Today felt different immediately. Conversations stopped whenever Ethan entered elevators or crowded hallways quietly. Several executives avoided direct eye contact while checking their phones nervously instead. The merger presentation suddenly disappeared from every conference room monitor upstairs. Ethan stormed into the finance department, demanding immediate explanations from everyone nearby. Nobody answered quickly enough. Finally, the company controller stepped forward looking visibly pale under fluorescent lights. "Sir, our overseas taxes were recalculated overnight," she explained carefully. "Someone prevented a federal investigation before opening markets this morning." Ethan frowned deeply while scanning updated financial reports across the conference table. The corrections matched Serena's comments from the ballroom exactly last night. Then another problem surfaced only minutes later unexpectedly. 3 major investors suddenly paused negotiations without giving official explanations publicly. Ethan slammed his tablet onto the glass table hard enough, startling nearby analysts. "Who contacted them?" he demanded sharply while tension filled the entire room. Nobody spoke for several uncomfortable seconds afterward. Then Ethan's longtime assistant finally cleared her throat quietly near the doorway. "Actually, Serena handled most investor relationships privately for years," she admitted softly. Ethan stared at her like hearing another language completely for the first time. "That is impossible," he muttered under his breath, almost defensively afterward. His assistant swallowed nervously before sliding a thick folder across the table slowly. Inside were dozens of signed agreements carrying Serena's initials beside billion-dollar numbers. Ethan's hands tightened immediately around the expensive leather folder corners silently. Then his office television suddenly switched automatically to breaking financial news downstairs. The anchor spoke one sentence that drained every remaining color from Ethan's face completely. "Vaughn Global Capital has officially suspended all negotiations with Caldwell Enterprises." But the photograph appearing behind the anchor shocked Ethan far worse than the announcement itself, because Serena stood beside the Vaughn chairman, smiling like she belonged there all along. The news clip replayed across every screen inside Caldwell Enterprises all morning. Serena stood beside Vaughn Global executives wearing a fitted charcoal suit confidently. Reporters crowded around her, while cameras flashed across polished marble floors repeatedly. Ethan remained frozen inside his office watching the same footage silently again. "Miss Vaughn personally suspended the merger after reviewing internal concerns," the reporter announced calmly. Ethan muted the television immediately, but could not stop staring afterward. 3 days earlier, employees barely noticed Serena entering company events beside him. Now entire financial networks repeated her name every single hour nationwide publicly. Ethan's phone buzzed nonstop with calls from nervous investors demanding explanations immediately. He ignored most calls while staring through downtown Chicago skyscrapers outside quietly. Meanwhile, Serena walked through Vaughn Global headquarters surrounded by senior executives respectfully. Employees greeted her warmly before elevator doors even opened each morning there. Several staff members stood immediately whenever Serena entered conference rooms unexpectedly throughout headquarters. Nobody treated her like background noise anymore. Nobody overlooked her simple calm voice during important meetings now either. That change spread quickly through every department inside the building already. Serena spent long hours reviewing damaged community housing projects across South Chicago carefully. She approved emergency funding for several struggling neighborhoods before leaving headquarters late nightly. Local business owners started recognizing her during community meetings across the city publicly. One elderly restaurant owner stopped Serena outside a corner bakery unexpectedly one afternoon. "You saved my family business during the pandemic," he told her emotionally. Serena smiled softly, but never explained how she helped them survive financially. Her driver opened the car door quietly while nearby reporters captured everything carefully. Back at Caldwell Enterprises, things continued falling apart faster every single day. Another investor officially withdrew support before noon during emergency board discussions upstairs. Ethan tried leading meetings confidently, but nobody trusted his decisions completely anymore. He noticed executives whispering whenever Serena's name appeared inside financial conversations repeatedly. Even junior analysts seemed strangely informed about Serena's hidden involvement previously there. Then Ethan overheard something outside the boardroom that stopped him completely cold. "She basically protected this company for years without receiving credit," one manager whispered quietly. "And he still threw her away publicly," another employee answered under her breath. Ethan kept walking, but those words stayed inside his head constantly afterward. Later that evening, Ethan attended a downtown financial charity gala, reluctantly alone tonight. The same executives who once ignored Serena suddenly praised her leadership openly there. One senator personally thanked Serena during a televised speech before hundreds attending. "Chicago needs more leaders like Miss Vaughn," he announced proudly before applause erupted loudly. Ethan stood near the ballroom entrance watching Serena shake hands confidently nearby tonight. Nobody introduced her as someone's wife anymore. They introduced her as someone important by herself now publicly. Serena noticed Ethan standing across the ballroom briefly, but showed no reaction afterward. That silence bothered Ethan more than anger ever possibly could tonight. He remembered mocking her simple dresses only days earlier during celebrations publicly. Now wealthy investors waited patiently, just for 5 minutes speaking beside Serena privately. Ethan suddenly realized people respected her before knowing her family name completely already. That thought unsettled him far deeper than losing the merger itself recently. Then Vaughn Global's chairman approached Serena carrying another sealed financial folder carefully tonight. "The board approved your recommendation unanimously this afternoon," he told her proudly. Ethan watched Serena open the folder slowly beneath glowing chandelier lights quietly there. Her expression changed immediately after reading the first page carefully through once. The chairman lowered his voice before saying one sentence Ethan barely managed overhearing nearby. "If Caldwell Enterprises collapses next week, thousands of employees lose everything immediately." Serena looked directly toward Ethan for the first time all evening, then finally asked softly, "Does he even understand what his company actually depends on yet?" The charity gala continued buzzing long after Serena lowered the financial folder quietly. Ethan could not stop watching her across the crowded ballroom that night. Every person near Serena listened carefully whenever she spoke softly there. Men worth billions waited patiently while she finished conversations with community leaders. Nobody interrupted her anymore. Nobody dismissed her simple calm voice anymore either. Ethan remembered telling Serena she embarrassed him publicly only 4 nights earlier. Now powerful executives adjusted their schedules just for brief meetings beside her. The contrast hit Ethan harder every passing minute inside that ballroom tonight. He finally crossed the room despite several investors stopping him repeatedly beforehand. Serena noticed him approaching but continued reviewing documents with another executive calmly. Ethan stopped beside the table awkwardly while nearby conversations slowly quieted around them. "Can we talk privately?" he asked carefully, struggling controlling his voice tonight. Serena looked up slowly but never stood from her seat afterward. "You had plenty of chances privately already," she answered without emotion calmly. Several executives exchanged uncomfortable glances after hearing her response directly there. Ethan felt heat rise across his face immediately under ballroom lights overhead. Before he could answer, Vaughn Global's chairman approached Serena respectfully carrying another folder. "Miss Vaughn, the mayor confirmed tomorrow's emergency housing meeting personally," he informed politely. Serena nodded once while signing several papers without hesitation afterward beside everyone there. Ethan stared silently while the chairman waited patiently for Serena's approval first. For days ago, Ethan controlled every room Serena entered beside him publicly. Tonight, even senior executives deferred decisions until Serena finished speaking completely first. That realization shook something inside Ethan deeper than professional embarrassment lately. Serena finally stood slowly while handing completed documents back toward the chairman nearby. "Thank you, Harold," she said calmly before turning toward Ethan afterward finally. Ethan noticed several reporters watching their interaction closely from nearby tables immediately now. Serena walked toward a quieter hallway beside the ballroom entrance without rushing anywhere. Ethan followed quickly, feeling strangely nervous despite knowing her for 7 years already. Rain tapped softly against tall windows overlooking downtown streets below outside tonight again. Serena remained calm, while Ethan struggled organizing thoughts clearly inside his head. "Why never tell me who you really were?" he asked, finally frustrated. Serena looked toward the rainy skyline before answering him quietly afterward there. "Because I wanted honesty before power entered the relationship," she replied softly. Ethan opened his mouth, but no explanation sounded strong enough anymore tonight there. Serena turned toward him fully for the first time since leaving their house behind. "Do you know why your company survived the recession 3 years ago?" she asked. Ethan frowned immediately, confused by the sudden question unexpectedly tonight there. Serena stepped closer slightly, while holding his gaze without anger or bitterness present. "Vaughn Global quietly backed your emergency loans through anonymous holding accounts," she revealed. Ethan felt his stomach tighten painfully after hearing those words spoken aloud there. "That was you," he whispered, almost unable believing her revelation completely tonight now. Serena nodded once slowly before looking away toward distant city lights outside silently. "You called me dead weight while living inside support systems I protected," she continued calmly. Ethan leaned backward against the wall, completely losing confidence for the first time. Nothing inside his carefully built world suddenly felt stable anymore after hearing everything. Then Serena's phone buzzed sharply inside the quiet hallway between them unexpectedly tonight there. Harold's voice came urgently through the speaker, loud enough reaching Ethan clearly nearby. "Miss Vaughn, Caldwell Enterprises just triggered another financial violation this evening." Serena closed her eyes briefly, while Ethan's breathing immediately became uneven beside her now. Harold continued speaking. Quickly afterward, while tension filled the hallway heavily around them. "If the board discovers who authorized those hidden transfers, someone could face criminal investigations by morning." Serena slowly lifted her eyes back toward Ethan after hearing those dangerous words completely. Then she asked one quiet question that drained every remaining confidence from his face instantly. "Ethan, what exactly did your executives convince you to sign after I left?" Ethan barely slept after leaving the charity gala late that stormy evening. Serena's final question kept replaying inside his mind without stopping once. By sunrise, Caldwell Enterprises looked nothing like his company anymore inside headquarters. Lawyers crowded conference rooms carrying sealed folders and emergency compliance documents everywhere. Several board members arrived earlier than usual without informing Ethan beforehand unexpectedly. Nobody greeted him warmly while entering the executive floor that morning either. Conversation stopped whenever he passed nearby employees or nervous department managers quietly. Ethan walked into the emergency board meeting already feeling control slipping dangerously away. Then he froze immediately after seeing Serena seated beside the company auditors calmly. Every board member stood respectfully when Serena entered the room only moments earlier. For days ago, Ethan mocked her simple dress before wealthy executives publicly there. Today, those same executives waited quietly for Serena speaking before making decisions now. Ethan slowly sat down while tension spread heavily across the glass conference table. The lead auditor opened several files while adjusting his glasses carefully afterward there. "Ms. Vaughn identified unauthorized offshore transfers linked to Caldwell executives," he explained clearly. Ethan looked stunned while board members exchanged alarmed glances around the room silently. "Those transactions nearly triggered a federal fraud investigation last week," the auditor continued. Serena remained calm while reviewing documents spread neatly before her across the table. Ethan noticed something strange immediately while watching everyone react toward Serena carefully. Nobody questioned her authority anymore. Nobody acted like she needed permission from anyone present there. Then Harold entered carrying another stack of financial reports beside several attorneys quietly. "The emergency funding stabilized payroll this morning," he announced toward the board professionally. One director leaned forward immediately, looking confused by the sudden announcement unexpectedly there. Who secured emergency liquidity overnight? He asked while scanning updated financial reports carefully. Harold glanced directly toward Serena before answering, without hesitation, inside the silent room. Miss Vaughn personally guaranteed temporary operating protection through Vaughn Global Capital. The entire room turned toward Serena immediately after hearing that revelation spoken aloud. Ethan stared silently, while realizing she just saved his collapsing company again recently. Yet nobody thanked Ethan. Nobody looked toward him for leadership anymore inside that room. Serena calmly signed another authorization page, while attorneys waited beside her patiently afterward. Ethan suddenly understood something painful sitting there watching everyone defer toward Serena. She was no longer connected to him socially, financially, or professionally anymore now. She existed above the chaos while he struggled surviving inside it completely alone. Then another problem exploded before the meeting even officially ended that afternoon. Caldwell Enterprises stock dropped another 12% during live market trading publicly nationwide. Reporters gathered outside headquarters asking questions about executive misconduct, rumors spreading online rapidly. Ethan tried speaking confidently during the press briefing downstairs moments later publicly there. But shareholders interrupted him repeatedly, demanding accountability before cameras kept recording continuously outside. Then one reporter suddenly asked the question Ethan feared hearing most publicly there. Is it true Miss Vaughn prevented your company from collapsing multiple times already? Ethan hesitated too long before answering, and everyone noticed immediately afterward silently there. The next morning, Serena visited one of Vaughn Global's community redevelopment projects downtown publicly. Construction crews stopped working briefly when she arrived at the site unexpectedly there. Several workers personally thanked Serena for restoring jobs lost during previous budget cuts. One elderly foreman shook Serena's hand while smiling proudly beside television reporters nearby. This woman kept 300 families employed during winter layoffs, he announced publicly. Ethan watched the entire interview replay across financial news channels later that evening silently. He remembered complaining whenever Serena came home tired after long mysterious meetings previously. Now thousands of people openly respected work he never even noticed before recently. Then Ethan received another sealed envelope delivered directly toward his empty office personally. Inside sat an old photograph showing Serena beside Caldwell's original founder 20 years earlier. A handwritten note rested beneath the picture using Harold's unmistakable signature carefully there. There is something about your company Serena never wanted you discovering too early. Ethan stared at the old photograph long after midnight inside his empty office. Serena stood beside Caldwell Enterprises founder William Caldwell, smiling warmly there. Harold's handwritten note rested beside the photograph beneath Ethan's trembling hand silently. Ethan flipped the picture over slowly and noticed a faded handwritten date immediately. The photograph was taken 15 years before Ethan joined the company professionally himself. That discovery alone made his stomach tighten with sudden confusion and dread. The next morning, Ethan arrived earlier than everyone else inside headquarters unexpectedly there. Rain covered downtown Chicago while office lights flickered across empty conference rooms silently. Ethan unlocked old storage cabinets rarely touched during the company's recent expansion carefully. Dust covered dozens of archived financial binders stacked against cold metal shelves downstairs. He searched through records until one specific name appeared repeatedly throughout old reports. Serena Vaughn. Ethan stopped breathing briefly while scanning several emergency financial agreements closely afterward there. Serena's name appeared beside confidential recovery loans during Caldwell's worst economic collapse previously. Ethan remembered hearing stories about that crisis during his early company training years. Executives always credited William Caldwell's genius leadership for saving the business completely. But the documents revealed something entirely different hidden beneath those public success stories. Serena quietly secured private investors after major banks refused helping Caldwell Enterprises survive. She negotiated labor protections preventing thousands of layoffs during brutal recession years nationwide. She even protected employee healthcare funding after insurance partners pulled out unexpectedly. Ethan sat silently while old memories suddenly shifted into painful new meanings completely. His first major promotion suddenly looked different inside his mind now afterward there. Serena personally arranged emergency financing supporting his division before executives approved his leadership. Ethan remembered celebrating that promotion while Serena cooked dinner quietly back home afterward. He never asked why she looked exhausted during those late nights previously then. Then Ethan discovered another folder carrying his own signature from 3 years earlier. He opened it slowly while anxiety spread heavily through his chest underneath silently. Serena's private recommendations filled almost every strategic proposal Ethan once claimed proudly himself. Her handwritten notes corrected major risks hidden inside expansion plans before market launches nationwide. Ethan leaned backward slowly while shame replaced confidence inside him completely afterward there. Everything he believed he built alone suddenly felt painfully incomplete and borrowed. Then someone knocked softly against the storage room doorway behind Ethan unexpectedly downstairs there. Harold stepped inside carrying coffee while watching Ethan carefully from several feet away silently. "You finally started looking," Harold said quietly before setting coffee beside the old files. Ethan looked toward him with visible confusion and growing disbelief inside his expression afterward. "Why hide all this from me?" he asked. While gripping the documents tightly, Harold sighed heavily before sitting across from Ethan beside stacked financial archives quietly there. "Because Serena asked us protecting your pride longer than necessary," he answered honestly. Ethan stared at him silently while hearing those words sink deeper painfully inside now. Harold continued speaking calmly while pointing toward older recovery reports spread across the table. "William Caldwell trusted Serena more than anyone inside this company before passing away." Ethan frowned immediately after hearing the founder's name connected directly toward Serena publicly. Harold nodded slowly before opening one final folder hidden beneath the remaining documents there. Inside rested handwritten letters signed personally by William Caldwell years before his death. Ethan unfolded the first letter carefully while his heartbeat suddenly became painfully uneven afterward there. "If anything happens to me, Serena must protect Caldwell Enterprises from future leadership failures." Ethan looked upward sharply after reading those devastating words printed clearly before him there. Harold watched Ethan quietly before delivering one final truth, changing everything even further afterward. "William never intended you inheriting full control without Serena guiding the company beside you." Ethan lowered his eyes slowly while every remaining piece of confidence finally collapsed completely inside. Then his phone buzzed sharply against the dusty storage table beside the opened letters. A breaking news alert flashed brightly across the dark screen immediately afterward there. Vaughn Global schedules emergency press conference regarding Caldwell Enterprises leadership crisis this afternoon. Ethan drove across downtown Chicago before sunrise without calling anyone beforehand nervously. Rain covered empty streets while news stations replayed Serena's upcoming press conference repeatedly. He gripped the steering wheel tightly while hearing Harold's words inside his head. Everything Ethan believed about himself suddenly felt unstable and painfully incomplete now. He stopped outside Vaughn Global headquarters before security gates slowly opened automatically there. 2 guards immediately approached his car before he reached the front entrance fully. For days earlier, employees rushed obeying Ethan whenever he entered corporate buildings publicly. Today, security checked his identification twice before allowing temporary visitor clearance reluctantly inside. Ethan walked through the marble lobby while employees passed him without recognition quietly. Nobody offered coffee. Nobody greeted him like an executive anymore there either. Meanwhile, Serena stood upstairs reviewing legal documents inside a glass conference room calmly. Senior attorneys waited patiently while Serena finished reading every page carefully there. One assistant whispered something quietly before Serena glanced toward the elevator monitors nearby. "Mr. Caldwell arrived requesting a private meeting downstairs," the assistant informed softly afterward. Serena stayed silent several seconds before finally closing the legal folder carefully there. "Give him 10 minutes," she answered calmly before returning toward unfinished documents immediately afterward. Ethan paced near the reception desk while checking his phone repeatedly and anxiously. Investors continued withdrawing support from Caldwell Enterprises almost every passing hour publicly now. Another board member resigned 20 minutes earlier without warning anyone beforehand unexpectedly there. Ethan barely noticed because only one thing mattered anymore inside his mind. Serena finally stepped from the private elevator wearing a dark navy business suit calmly. Several employees immediately moved aside respectfully while she crossed the lobby floor downstairs. Ethan remembered mocking her simple clothes during company parties only days earlier publicly. Now entire floors stopped moving whenever Serena entered shared corporate spaces unexpectedly there. Ethan stepped toward her quickly while security guards watched nearby, without interfering, yet silently. "Serena, please just listen for 1 minute," he asked almost breathlessly there. Serena stopped walking but kept several feet separating them carefully between marble columns. "You already spoke enough during our marriage," she answered quietly without raising emotion. Ethan swallowed hard while struggling, keeping his composure completely under control anymore now. "I did not understand anything back then," he admitted while lowering his voice. Serena folded her arms calmly while attorneys waited behind her near elevators silently there. "No," Serena corrected softly. "You understood exactly what benefited your ego comfortably." Ethan flinched slightly after hearing those words spoken without anger or cruelty present. That calmness unsettled him more deeply than shouting ever could have possibly tonight. "I know the truth now," Ethan continued desperately while stepping slightly closer toward Serena. Security immediately moved forward 1 step before Serena raised her hand calmly there. Even security waited for Serena's permission before reacting to Ethan's movement publicly now. Ethan noticed that detail instantly, and the realization hit painfully hard afterward there. Serena no longer belonged inside spaces he controlled socially or professionally anymore now. "You knew everything about Caldwell Enterprises before I ever joined," Ethan whispered carefully. Serena nodded once, but showed no pride while hearing his shaken voice nearby. "William trusted me protecting people connected to that company," she answered calmly afterward. Ethan stared at her silently, while rain rolled down towering lobby windows heavily outside. "Then help me fix this before everything collapses completely," he finally pleaded quietly there. Serena looked directly into his eyes for several uncomfortable seconds afterward silently now. "You still think this crisis only started after I left?" she replied softly. Ethan frowned immediately, confused by the deeper meaning behind her response afterward there. Before he could ask another question, several reporters suddenly entered the lobby hurriedly downstairs. Cameras turned instantly towards Serena while microphones crowded around nearby executives rapidly afterward. "Miss Vaughn, is it true you are removing Caldwell leadership permanently today?" One reporter shouted loudly across the marble lobby floor publicly there. Ethan looked towards Serena immediately, while panic finally replaced every remaining piece of confidence. Serena accepted a sealed document from Harold before answering any reporters gathered downstairs publicly. Then she looked directly toward Ethan one final time before speaking 6 devastating words quietly. "The board vote starts in exactly 1 hour." The boardroom doors closed heavily while rain hammered Chicago skyscraper windows outside continuously. Ethan entered last while executives avoided direct eye contact with him silently afterward. Serena sat calmly near the far end beside Vaughn global attorneys quietly there. Every seat around her remained occupied by people waiting for her decisions first. For days earlier, Ethan controlled every room Serena quietly entered beside him publicly. Now he stood alone while others waited respectfully for Serena speaking instead today. Harold opened the emergency board session exactly 9 o'clock without unnecessary introductions afterward there. "We will begin final leadership discussions regarding Caldwell Enterprises immediately," he announced calmly. Ethan barely listened because his attention remained fixed completely on Serena nearby silently. She looked composed, focused, completely untouched by his growing panic emotionally inside now. The board reviewed financial damage reports for nearly 30 exhausting minutes, continuously afterward there. Every failed transaction connected directly toward executives Ethan trusted after Serena left publicly. Several directors quietly resigned before the meeting officially reached final voting procedures downstairs. Ethan watched his entire professional world collapse piece by piece before everyone silently. Then Harold placed one final document directly before Serena across the long table. "Miss Vaughn, final authority remains entirely yours regarding restructuring decisions," he announced clearly. Ethan looked around the room, desperately hoping someone would challenge Harold's statement immediately there. Nobody did. Nobody questioned Serena's authority over the company any more publicly now either. Serena opened the document slowly while silence spread across the boardroom heavily. Afterward there, Ethan finally stood abruptly, unable controlling himself any longer emotionally inside completely now. "Please stop this before everything disappears," he said while facing Serena directly there. Serena lifted her eyes calmly, but showed absolutely no hesitation afterward nearby silently. "Everything already disappeared the night you threw me outside," she answered quietly. Ethan shook his head immediately while stepping closer toward the conference table desperately there. "I was angry, arrogant, stupid," he admitted while his voice slightly cracked publicly. Serena remained seated while several executives watched the painful exchange uncomfortably nearby silently. "No," Serena corrected softly while closing the document before her completely afterward there. "You were honest about who mattered least inside your world." Ethan looked devastated hearing those words spoken without hatred or bitterness present anymore. That calmness finally broke something remaining inside him emotionally beyond professional fear completely now. "I loved you," Ethan whispered while struggling holding eye contact steadily there afterward. Serena stared quietly several seconds before answering him one final painful truth calmly. "You loved feeling superior beside someone who never competed with your ego." The room fell completely silent after hearing her devastating response publicly there now. Ethan slowly lowered himself back into his chair while realization fully reached him finally. Serena continued speaking calmly, while every executive inside that room listened carefully afterward there. "I protected your company, your family, and your future for years." Ethan closed his eyes briefly while shame spread across his exhausted expression completely afterward. "And you still introduced me like an inconvenience needing your permission publicly," Serena finished. Ethan looked toward her desperately, almost unable accepting what he destroyed completely now. "Tell me what I can do fixing any part of this," he asked quietly. Serena stood slowly while gathering the finalized documents neatly before everyone silently there. "There is nothing left returning us toward who we used becoming," she answered calmly. Then Serena placed her signature across the final restructuring approval page without hesitation publicly. Harold immediately collected the signed documents while attorneys exchanged quiet confirmations nearby afterward there. Ethan understood everything the moment security deactivated his executive credentials remotely downstairs immediately. His company access vanished before he even stood from his chair completely afterward there. Serena walked toward the boardroom exit while executives respectfully moved aside for her silently. Ethan remained frozen watching the woman he underestimated walk completely beyond his reach forever. Before leaving, Serena stopped briefly beside the doorway without turning back toward him there. "You did not lose me because I became powerful," she said quietly afterward there. "You lost me because I finally stopped surviving inside your small definition." Then Serena walked out while rain covered the city skyline beyond dark windows silently. Ethan remained alone inside the collapsing silence, while one final notification appeared across every executive screen nearby. Press conference begins in 15 minutes announcing permanent Caldwell restructuring leadership. 3 months later, Chicago looked different beneath clear autumn skies and colder winds. Vaughn Global's new community headquarters opened beside the renovated Riverfront District downtown. Hundreds attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony early that bright Saturday morning publicly. Local families filled the plaza while reporters crowded around temporary outdoor stages nearby. Serena stood near the entrance wearing a soft gray coat and calm smile. Children from local housing programs ran laughing across the courtyard behind her freely. The same city once whispering about Serena now spoke her name with respect. Business leaders waited patiently, while community volunteers greeted Serena warmly throughout the morning. Nobody saw her as someone's wife anymore. That chapter no longer existed publicly now. Serena moved through the crowd comfortably, speaking quietly with workers and families nearby. She remembered carrying grocery bags home during exhausting winter nights years earlier. She remembered sitting silently beside Ethan while executives ignored her completely at dinners. Back then, people noticed her only when standing beside someone more powerful publicly. Now people listened because of what she built, protected, and quietly sustained herself. Harold approached Serena during the ceremony carrying another community development proposal folder carefully. The city approved every housing expansion request this morning, he announced proudly afterward. Serena smiled softly before signing several documents beside the crowded plaza quietly there. Cameras flashed repeatedly while local reporters praised Von Global's newest neighborhood investment publicly. Serena thanked everyone briefly before stepping away from the microphones calmly afterward there. She no longer needed public approval proving her worth to anyone anymore now. Across town, Ethan sat alone inside a smaller rented office overlooking busy streets below. Caldwell Enterprises still existed, but under completely different leadership and strict supervision now. Ethan no longer appeared on magazine covers or financial conference panels publicly anymore. Most days passed quietly while he reviewed reports nobody asked his opinion about. The silence felt heavier than losing money or executive status ever previously did. One afternoon, Ethan stopped inside a small neighborhood grocery store unexpectedly after work. The cashier recognized him immediately while scanning groceries beneath bright fluorescent lights silently there. "Miss Vaughn helped my mother keep her apartment last winter," she mentioned casually. Ethan nodded quietly while hearing Serena's name connected toward another unseen kindness again afterward. Moments like that happened constantly now. Everywhere Ethan looked, Serena's impact quietly remained inside people's lives permanently there. He finally understood the hardest truth too late and far too clearly. Serena never needed wealth proving her value because her value built everything quietly already. Ethan once believed power meant being admired, feared, and publicly recognized constantly everywhere. Serena showed him something entirely different without ever trying proving anything publicly herself. Real strength stayed steady even when nobody clapped, noticed, or defended it openly. Late that evening, Ethan drove past the renovated riverfront headquarters one final time silently. Warm lights glowed through tall windows while employees finished another successful community fundraiser upstairs. Ethan noticed Serena standing near the balcony speaking softly with several young interns nearby. She looked peaceful, not victorious, not bitter, just free from everything once diminishing her quietly. Ethan remained inside his car several minutes before finally driving away without stopping afterward. For the first time, he understood Serena no longer belonged inside his regrets anymore. She had already stepped beyond the version of herself surviving beside him silently. Upstairs, Serena watched the city lights reflect across the dark river beneath calmly tonight. Harold stepped beside her quietly before asking one final question with gentle curiosity afterward. "Do you ever wish he understood sooner?" Serena looked toward the skyline, while autumn wind moved softly around them there. Then she smiled faintly before answering the entire story in one quiet sentence calmly. "The saddest thing about losing good people is realizing their value afterward." She turned away from the balcony peacefully, while laughter and warm voices filled the building behind her. And somewhere across the city, Ethan finally understood he lost her long before she ever walked away.